I begin my sermon this morning, I want to say a word about the lectionary, how we get our readings on Sunday. So today is the last Sunday after the Epiphany. That Sunday is set by Ash Wednesday, which is of course set by the date of Easter. And depending on when Easter falls, this could also be the 8th Sunday after the Epiphany, not the last Sunday. And the readings are different for the 8th Sunday and the last Sunday, and the astute preacher will pay attention to that and note that. I am not an astute preacher, apparently. So I'm going to tell you about the readings that I prepared for that you didn't hear, so that my sermon makes some sense for you this morning. The readings are pretty simple. They're good readings. The readings that are for the 8th Sunday really have to do both in the Old Testament and the New Testament with what Scripture calls the fruits that we bear, right? How we live this wonderful life we've been given. What are the fruits of our lives? And so Isaiah in the Old Testament likens Israel and as also the inhabitants of Israel to an orchard, and suggests that it is important how we care for the trees in the orchard, and good trees bear good fruit and bad trees bear bad fruit, and we don't want the ones bearing bad fruit. We want to be the good trees. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus is speaking to his followers about the importance of who we choose as teachers. Who are our mentors? Who are the people we look up to? Who do we accept in life as our teachers? And Jesus says to his followers that if our teachers are blind, and by that he doesn't mean sight, but he means a spiritual or a moral or ethical blindness. If our teachers are blind, if they're hypocritical, those bad fruits of hypocrisy and moral blindness will become our fruits. And so Jesus says to his followers, it's important who you choose as your teachers. And the point that Luke is making with that is that Jesus is the teacher we should look to. So these are good teachings, it's good advice. But as I pondered these readings this last week, it occurred to me, I had some insight about myself, and it occurred to me that when I hear readings like that pointing out bad fruit and bad teachers, I almost immediately say to myself, you know, Jesus, I know exactly who you're talking about. You know, Isaiah, I know who those bad trees are, and I can put a face and a name to those, but I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind. I don't think that's what God had in mind when he called his prophet to give this word to Israel. I think we are rather to look inward before we look outward. But then I began to ponder these some more, and I had what was a more disturbing sort of existential thought about these readings. Because it seemed to me that there is a finality in what Isaiah says. There's a finality in what Jesus is saying to his followers about what happens when we don't care for the fruits and the gifts we're given, that when we choose the wrong teachers. And it's almost as though Isaiah and possibly even Jesus are saying, don't go down that path because you can't really turn back from it. And that doesn't fit with what I understand the gospel to be. And yet in my ministry I have met people, thankfully not many but a few, who believed that something they had done in their life had put them beyond the grace and forgiveness of God. And these were people, the most part, that I thought were good people. They were grappling with their relationship with God. They were trying to be in a good relationship with God, but they came to believe that something about their lives had put them beyond redemption. And as I was able to walk with them a little bit of time while they were going through that, I came to understand the depths of despair that they felt, believing that they were too broken for the forgiveness of God. So if you have a few minutes, I want to tell you a story. And this is a story about a chair. When my mother died in 2003, my brothers and my sister and I came together. We all were living in Nashville, and we decided that we needed to sell the house. And I know that Probably many of you have been through this, so we had to come together and prepare the house, clean it out, prepare it to put it on the market. My parents had lived in that house for over 40 years. They had raised 4 children, and my mother had lived there by herself the last 10 years of her life, and she was not a woman who easily got rid of anything. Now, we all worked. We had full-time jobs and careers, and so we came to that house and worked on it as we could. Everybody chipped in as best they could, but clearly it was going to take a while. It was a big old house that had been built in the 20s, and it had a full basement and a first floor and a second floor and an attic. And we began in the basement and went to work. We rented a 40 cubic yard construction dumpster. You see them at big commercial sites. We brought it and had it put in the driveway behind the house. We went to work. And you know, you got to look at everything, right? You got to look at everything. Do you throw it away? Do you keep it? Do you give it away? Do you sell it? And as the days went by, the days turned into weeks, and the weeks went by, we got pretty good at making those decisions. And we filled that dumpster up and had it hauled away and another one put in its place. And we still weren't finished. But little by little we got there. First the basement, then the first floor, then the second floor, and finally we were almost done. We were to the attic. Now, the attic to this house had a small door off of a hall by some bedrooms on the second floor, and I knew that attic as a child. You open the door, and there, just inside, was a cord coming down with a single light bulb in that attic. And it never gave much light, but as a boy on rainy days, I would sometimes get a flashlight, and I'd explore the attic, so I knew it. I knew it a little bit. We began to clean it out, and it's the kind of stuff you see, right? Some books and I guess old hats, lamps, just stuff. We got it cleaned out for the most part. And the day came when everything was out of the attic except for one corner way in the farthest back. And I got my flashlight and I went back to see what was in that corner. And there was the chair. And I remembered when I saw it as an adult, I remember then seeing that chair as a child, exploring the attic. It was a Windsor chair. You've seen those. They're very graceful, a nice arched back. But this chair was broken. When I say broken, what I really mean was it was smashed. Something violent had happened to that chair. And in my entire life, I never remember seeing that chair in my parents' house. I think I knew it had been in that attic since the day they moved in. It might have even been broken when they put it in the attic. And the pieces were sort of all piled up in the seat of the chair. And so I took it and I brought it out of the attic and I put it in the hallway to look at it. And immediately my sister and my brother said, "Into the dumpster it goes. It's too far gone." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I kept wondering, why in the world would anybody keep a chair that was so badly damaged for 40 years and perhaps even more? And so I gathered the pieces up and I put it in my car, and Sarah and I took it to our house where we put it in our basement and it sat there for another 12 years. The day came when we had to sell our house because I was moving into a rectory of a new church in Franklin, and we packed everything up. We packed up that chair and took it to the rectory. We put it in the basement of the rectory, and it sat there. And one day I discovered that I had a parishioner who was a master furniture repairer. And so I got him to come over to the house to look at this chair because he worked for museums. I mean, I knew this guy could do the job. And he looked at it and he said, "I don't know, Bill. This is really in bad shape." He said, "I'm going to have to make some new parts for it. And I can't tell you how long it'll take or what it'll cost. But if you give it to me, you'll get it back one day. But I can't tell you when." And that didn't sound too good. So I just left it there. And eventually we moved and came to Darien. And we packed that chair up. And we brought it to Darien with us in pieces. and we put it in the corner of a room that we don't use very much. And there it sat. A couple of years after we'd been here, we decided that we had some furniture that needed to be recovered, had a really nice table that was having some veneer problems. We wanted to fix it. We started looking around for somebody who could do this work, and we didn't know many folks, didn't know anybody, but couldn't quite find somebody who could do it. And we're talking to some friends in Tennessee one day, and they say, well, we know just the person. There's this guy outside of Murfreesboro, has done a lot of work. He's the guy. So I called him. The problem is he lived 500 miles away. And so he said, well, I might be able to fix it. I said, well, how are we going to get the furniture down? He said, I've never been to coastal Georgia, and I've always wanted to go. I'll make a deal with you. I'll bring my van down, you put me up, and you buy me some shrimp, and I'll fix your furniture. That's a good deal. So a couple of weeks later, he shows up. We put him up. We buy him the best fried shrimp, by the way, he's ever had in his life. And the next day, we load the van up with our furniture. And Lloyd, that was his name, is getting in his van. He's getting ready to go back to Tennessee, and I had a thought. And I said, Lloyd, let me show you one more thing. And so I went and I got that chair, and I said, do you think you can do anything with this? And he looked at it, he said, yeah, I might be able to fix that. And so we put it in the van, and he drove back to Tennessee. Now, he was a good furniture repairer, and he was reasonably priced, but he was really slow. Months passed. I even had a wedding to do in Tennessee about 6 months later. When I was there, I just went by his shop to see if he was really there, see if he had my stuff. And he was. And he said, I'll get to it. It's going to take a while. A few more months passed, and one day I get a phone call. He says, it's done. I'll be down in a couple of days. And sure enough, he shows up with his van one evening, and we take him out to dinner and get him some more shrimp, and the next morning we start to unload the van. And the chairs come out, and the reupholstery looks great, and the table looks great. But I'm wondering. And there, in the very back of the van, was a chair. We get that chair, we bring it out, and we put it in the house in the living room. And that chair looked fabulous. Unbelievable. You could hardly tell that it had been broken almost beyond repair. I had to look at it so closely to even see the breaks and the cracks in the furniture where he put it together. It was magnificent. And I sat in that chair that had been destroyed almost beyond recognition for more than half a century. And it was back to what it had been made to be. A beautiful chair. Is there a moral to this story? I don't know, maybe. Maybe the moral is this: that with enough time, and with enough patience, and with enough care, nothing is really broken beyond being fixed. Or maybe the moral is this: that with enough time, with enough patience, with enough care, no one is broken beyond the redemption and love of God.